focus.
Thank you all for joining us for live Q&A and office hours with Dr. Brandeis Marshall. This session is a follow-up to Dr. Marshall's video lecture Bias from Data Conscious Algorithmic Siege on Our Humanity that you've already watched, which is also the name of her forthcoming book. I will introduce Susanna, who will introduce our speaker. Susanna, where are you?
I am here. So Dr. Brandeis Marshall teaches, speaks, and writes about the impact of data practices on technology and society. Her work contributes to the data engineering, data science, and data computer science education fields. Through Dr. Marshall's data education firm, DataedX group, she guides current tech workers in building data equity skills. Her first book, Data Conscious Algorithm, I don't know how to pronounce, on Our Humanity, is expected to be released later in 2022. It unearths the interlocking computational and civic implications of data and digital processes, structures, and institutions. Dr. Marshall holds a Ph.D. and a Master of Science in Computer Science from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, and a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from the University of Rochester. She is on sabbatical leave from Spelman College, where she is a full professor of computer science.
Thank you so much, Susanna. I love getting our participants involved with the introduction of our speakers. I also shout out to RPI. You're our second PhD from RPI. So Dr. Hannah de los Santos, who's at MITRE now, spoke with us yesterday.
Nice.
So shout out to RPI,
Yes.
Niska, Yuta, and Troy. Okay, so before we jump into any of the questions that we've been collecting from our participants and our larger community, I would love for you to give us the cliff notes to the video. So for those people, we've got an engaged audience here, but you know those people who aren't here, they didn't watch the video.
Right.
So can you give us the 60,000-foot cliff notes? You know, what were the takeaways before we jump into some questions?
So the takeaway is that bias is everywhere, full stop. And the way I talk about bias is that there are several different definitions that I kind of hone in on. One is more societal, which is we're talking about discrimination. It typically is deemed like the social scientist viewpoint, the humanities viewpoint. And then there is the corollary, which is the STEM version, the scientific version, the one that talks about statistical error. And all those wonderful things, right? Hyperparameters, parameters, and all of those things, p-values and things like that. So I'm coming in as a computer science trained person, but I'm letting people know that bias, actually, we should consider all forms of it. And more importantly, we should look at the societal impact, because the societal impact of bias actually permeates throughout everything that we do, including the scientific definition. So the big takeaways that I mentioned happen to be about how do we deal with this ripple effect? And I address it by looking at, hey, let's think about a wheel and how a wheel makes different impacts based upon when it's rotating and how it's rotating. And so I really want people to think about bias not so one-dimensionally. So, you know, straight line arrow down with one solution path. There's many different solutions. There's many different approaches and remedies that we need to start thinking about. We need to think broader, especially us that are analytically minded. Let's get out of our quantitative mind a bit, start getting into the qualitative and start to actually talk about real issues and real remedies, real interventions, real approaches, and not try to make everything about math. So yes, I'm a computer scientist that's talking about not being computery.
Ooh, all right. So so I have so many questions, and I know our participants do as well. But I think it would be helpful for us to learn a bit about your trajectory to this point and tell us a little bit about DataedX. So I want to make sure we start there, because I know it's becoming an increasingly important part of your life. I'm on the email list, so I get all the emails. So I know there's a lot going on. And there's a conference coming up. Please tell us about that. And after that, I'm going to ask you some questions about your forthcoming book.
Okay. So trajectory to now is that I am a career academic transitioning into datapreneurship, which means that I am taking all of my education and teaching background and transferring it into the business realm, because I really believe that we've come to a point in our society where we can't keep talking about helping the next generation. The next generation is people right now. The algorithms, the systems, the institutions that are impacting our world are currently being designed by people who are all grown-ups. If we keep saying the next generation, we're just kicking the can down the road, and that road never ends. So DataedX Group is really designed to essentially look at 3 different pillars, which is education, equity, and of course, ethics when it comes to data, and doing our best in order to provide professional development experiences and resources. So yes, I have a newsletter, Rebel Tech, that comes out every 2 weeks. Yes, I focus very much on inclusivity, which is not just something in the HR realm. It's actually something that I'm saying is in data ops. Every part of the data pipeline needs to talk about inclusivity and equity, and what does that really look like? How is that expressed? And of course, as part of my inclusivity notion, I'm focused on Black women and how Black women needs to have a seat at the table where data lives, and that's every table, since Black women are the most educated, at least in the United States, and I argue the entire world, even though we make up only about 1% or less than 1% of the data industry. So that's my trajectory. And as part of that, I'm actually hosting the first ever Black Women in Data Summit that's happening October 1st and 2nd in Atlanta. Be here, be square, for mid-career Black women. And these are Black women who have been reorged a couple of times, who are in managerial lines, potentially C-suite, but that understand the office politics and now trying to figure out how to navigate to their next level. If that is going to a managerial line, if that is going to the C-suite, if that means transitioning completely outside of tech, but just doing our best in order to provide a space, a safe space, in order to have these conversations about how data and your domain expertise intersect. So that's what's happening. And what else? You asked me other questions, Nanette, and then
No, I think I
covered.
No, you covered all of them. So I believe you are our first solo data entrepreneur we brought into the space. So I'm very excited on to get a chance to hear about that experience as well, because I know our participants who are PhD candidates and students, faculty before tenure, and also postdocs are considering the wide range of opportunities. And so I think we'd love to hear more about that. And we have folks who are asking for you to drop that information in the chat box. I should already say I'm planning to go, still need to pay Brandeis so I can go, but I'm planning on going. And there's workshops and all sorts of stuff. So please drop that in the chat box for us. Before we jump into your book, again, so since you're presenting such a unique experience for our gathering so far, can you tell us about the experience of transitioning to being a data entrepreneur, the things you had to do, the challenges that you've encountered? I can imagine this path is not easy, but I'm sure you make it look easy. Go ahead.
I don't know if I make it look easy. If anyone follows me on Twitter, I do a lot of tweets that are very much subtweets. Because the experience has been one of personal growth and really of struggle. And one of the things that has been, I guess, in the forefront of my mind is just the notion of being a helper. As an educator, you are constantly in the role of nourishing other people with your knowledge. And it's intoxicating because people look to you, but at the same time, you are the one in the lead. And that is this push-pull, right? You love it and then you hate it all at the same time because you don't want the responsibility, but then you have the responsibility. When I'm transitioning as I'm transitioning into datapreneurship, there's no safety net. People sometimes don't want your help. They literally fight you. No, I don't need training on anything. And I'd be like, do you have a data team? And they don't have a data team. They just have a CTO. And the CTO has no idea about the data pipeline, have no idea about data governance. And this whole organization, you find out, is basically a house of cards ready to crumble, and they're not like talking to you. So there's been that challenge. So moving from being a helper to being more business minded, which means putting in systems to actually ask some questions and not just giving information. Because as an educator, I'm just giving information and I'm not paid for it. When you're in business, you got to get paid, like PAID, paid, and not just like notions of money that you get in academia. You need actual checks. You need to put in systems so that you actually can get the money in your account. So you can't be using Venmo. You can't be using Apple Pay. Like, you need to have like clear systems, because a lot of these organizations, they need to have an invoice. They need to have a payment link. So these are some of the things that are a bit different. More specifically and tangibly, what I've had to do is not respond to email from my plantation account. Because when email comes in from the plantation account, it typically is someone who wants me to do something for free. But it really is a paid gig on my business side, on my company side. And so I either forward them to my company email and then kindly let them know what the pay rate is. You're gonna pay for this PhD. Or they just don't respond in kind. So understanding that type of ghosting is something very different. Ghosting inside of academic spaces can be very toxic, but it's to be expected. But in the business world, you're really looking to establish yourself. And so when people ghost you, you really don't understand why. But it's literally because you asked for pay. And they're not used to hearing a face like mine, with locks like mine, with a PhD like mine, asking for money when I have an academic affiliation. They automatically think things should be free that come out of my mouth.
And I feel that deeply as an entrepreneur myself, and as a student, I frequently get emails where someone wants me to consult on something. We'd love to just come talk to this company. That means you have money.
Right.
And tell us about this. And I'm noticing a trend where a lot of the academics that we've reached out for this for this conference have representation with speakers bureaus, have the equivalent of a publicist or an agent, and there's levels that you need to go to get them, because a lot of folks are trying to perform things now, and they want our voices to be part of that. So, wherever you enter into this space, and this is even for PhD students, so there are quite a few people we reached out to who are notable voices in the tech space who have representation. So make sure that you are not, what is it from Jerry Maguire, giving away the pretty. Okay,
yes.
So all right. So I thank you for that. That's an important point. And for folks, if you're trying to figure out a follow-on video after this one, to think about that intersection of tech, and entrepreneur. So our new, we're just announcing this now, actually. Our closing speaker is Laverne Council, who is a CIO in government, and has also held that role across various organizations and also in board service. So there's a lot to learn here, and I'm deeply appreciative of your presence, Brandeis. So let's talk about your book. So this is your first book.
Yes.
Yeah, first of many. I'm going to call that out. First of many books.
Okay, you and my husband are in cahoots. Did you talk to him before?
No, I have not. He pays me. He pays me. So first
Wait,
of many.
That's where that money's going.
Exactly. That's where the money's going. There's a Nanette sub tweet. There's a count there. So back to you. So your first book. So can you talk to us about what it took to get somebody to say yes? I want to publish this book. What you had to do to get there, like the process, because I think there are probably a lot of book writers in this space that are looking for guidance.
Yes. So I will preface this by saying most books, like 90%, are written by white men. So if you're in this room and thinking about writing a book, write a book. We need your voice. So my process was really serendipitous. I was, I believe, a non-residential fellow at Harvard. And so I had a Harvard email address that I barely used, but I received an email that asked me for information about writing a book about ethics. And this was a circa 2018 or so. And I was like, I don't know about this. But I had the conversation. I kind of took a leap of faith, started that process with that publisher. And then it became like they wanted me to do a checklist on ethics. And I was like, this is not how this is gonna work. That disrupts my spirit. And so I wind up writing, I think, about 3 chapters. They had it sent out and had it reviewed by someone I don't know. And then they kind of came back and said, we're gonna have to part ways. And so I didn't get paid. And I was pretty hurt about that. And I was disappointed. And then I talked with someone else who was actually writing a book, and her name is Ayardeli. And she is also on the Twitter. She is fabulous as well, if you do not know her. And she wound up saying, well, I'm writing a book and here's my publisher. And so maybe I can introduce you to my acquisitions officer and let's, have a conversation. And I said, oh, that would be great. And so I already had a template of what I thought the book was going to be already. So when I talked with the second publisher, happened to be Wiley, I already had an idea of what I wanted to do. And they were like, well, submit it. It was like November of 2020. Yeah. And they were like, great, they got the contract, started working on the book in February of 2021. And so that process really was me going on the interwebs and looking up how to write a book proposal. That's what it is. Yeah, you just go to the interwebs and you look it up. You type in things and words that make sense. You look at who are competitors. Because I'm in the education business, I already knew what books were out there and how they were just case studies and how they were very much high level and they didn't really get tangible. So then in creating my book proposal in the section that asked like, what would make your book distinctive? It was pretty easy. I was like, I'm gonna be tangible. I'm gonna like talk about the things. And I said, I'm gonna talk about white supremacy. These are things that are not in these other books. I'm gonna talk about all of the things. And then about halfway through writing, I changed the last part of my book. So I changed how I organized the book as I got into actually writing the chapters. But yeah, it took a while. It's definitely a process. You're not going to get it right the first time is my biggest advice. I talked to a few people who had written books, but still my book is just different because nobody is talking about oppression in tech. There's no book. I looked on the interwebs. None. Yes, and interwebs is one word.
The Twitter, the interwebs. I sent to our group, I'm like, the interwebs, write stuff, find things.
Well, I don't say the G.
Is that a direct quote for Twitter for us? Use the internet, write words, find things.
Yeah, I see, I don't say the G word as a substitute for search. So I just say the interwebs.
I dig this. Susanna, you want to kick off our questions?
Yes, actually, one is a follow-up on Nanette's question on transitioning from academia to being a datapreneur.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, well, several things. One is that I don't know if you're going to transition full-time to being a datapreneur, but if how is that transition? Because at least for me, it feels like I need a safety net, right? So like going from a, full salary and you're a full professor to being an entrepreneur seems whoa, like how, like you mentioned, like who's gonna pay me, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then also about the process of like leveraging, I know that obviously you have many skills, but how did you like curated your skills into measurable, like, you know, when you offer a business, you have to be very clear on the services you offer. So how was that? How did you define exactly how your skills were going to transition into providing a service or business?
Oh my God, that's an awesome question. So for the first question, the safety net is real because this is the way we're conditioned. You know, we're part of the white colonist engine. And that is the one that says that there has to be worker bees, and then there has to be, you know, the people who own the worker bees. Essentially, that's the way our world is set up, is just a reinvention of slavery. Sorry, I kind of went really deep there, but that's what I believe. So
we're here for that.
We're here for
that. Yeah, you have friends here. There are cookies. Go there.
So that's what we believe, is that we need to have a safety net, that we can't rely on our own mental capacity in order to generate money. That's what we believe, but that is far from the truth. I mean, especially if you're an educator, I used to say when I was an assistant professor that I was COO, company of one. Because you were doing everything. If you're an assistant professor, or you've seen assistant professors, or if your advisor is an assistant professor, you see that person doing like literally 12 different jobs. Okay, literally 12 different jobs. Okay, so the safety net in me said, okay, I definitely want to make sure I have healthcare, I want to make sure I have funds. And so I am transitioning to go full time. And that does mean that I am on sabbatical. So my sabbatical is 1 year. I'm extending it another year. We'll see, right? But the second year, I will have no part-time funding, right? I will be off the roster, so to speak, right? I will no longer be doing the healthcare. So I got to get it on my own, right? So that is a reality that's coming to mind. And so as you think business-wise, you have to think about money slightly differently. It's not just this regular check that comes. Money comes in chunks. And so you have to then partition the money out. So if you get a $5,000 gig, you don't just spend $5,000. You then ration it out $500 over 10 months. You make sure that part of it's going toward taxes. You make sure that part of it is being salary directly to you. You make sure part of it is going to the operations of the business, like hiring a virtual assistant or social media marketing or what have you. So your thoughts about money shifts to not just being yours, but being what is the company's, and then what of the company's therefore comes back to you. And that's a mind shift. So that's the first question. There's more to say, but I got to move on. Second question that you had was like, how did I decide the services? And it was really noodles to the wall, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And that's the hardest thing, is when you are an educator, it's very simple. You are there to create curriculum, deliver curriculum, grade, and assess what has been taught. And so you're kind of relegated to like one lane. But when you are a business owner, you still have these multiple projects that you're working on. You have to see them as multiple projects. One project is generating revenue. Another project is generating whatever your content is or your services are. Another bucket is finances and being like a CFO. They're just different projects. You just have to see it in different, you have to translate it and map it in different ways. So I just tried different things. I tried speaking engagements. I tried creating workshops. I talked to people. I tweeted a lot. People came to me because of my tweets, because I quote, right? So I said, okay, what do people come to me for? They come to me for my opinion. So then I go, what do I need for them to pay me for my opinion? And then that's when I started looking at how much are taxes. Dang, taxes are like 30%. So, okay, I need to increase that by 30%. So if you're trying to make $100,000, that's, if you're working 40 hours a week, that's about $50 an hour. But who wants to work 40 hours a week and own their own business and do all these different projects? Like, bet, like, I don't want to do all that. I don't want to do, like 500 speaking gigs in order to get to $100,000 by charging like $1,000 speaking gig. Like, that's stupid. I want to charge $4, $5, $6, $10,000 for a speaking gig, so then I can do less speaking gigs, but then I can really make sure that I am now spreading out my projects that I need to cover in my business well. So I've settled on master classes because it's still in the educational realm, and also workshops. And of course, I'm building out a data equity professional certificate. So that's going to be a program. So it's still in the educational realm, but I'm really focused in on data educators, data scholars, and data practitioners, and providing them with things. And that seems to be where people still respect my PhD. People don't feel as though I need an MBA. And also people come to me for that knowledge. They want to know what I think about how to really build equitable practices. So that's what I want to give them.
We have a question that follows on to Susanna's from Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for being with us today, Brandeis. I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like this is the stuff that everyone is doing, but nobody really talks about, like sort of generating other streams of revenue or multiple streams of revenue. And so my question, picking up on Susanna's, is like, how do you balance, because if I understand correctly, you're a professor as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you balance your professorial academic responsibilities with the sort of consulting, teaching side gigs that you're doing? And like, do you ever experience any tension there? Is there any, like, have you ever gotten negative feedback about the sort of side projects that you do? Or, and also when and how you got started with the side stuff?
Oh my God, these are such good questions. Okay. So right now I'm fully focused on DataedX group. I'm on sabbatical from the institution. So my concentration is like fully on the company, and of course on the book, and of course on the conference. So that's where it's fully on. Prior to that though, I was very skittish. I started DataedX group in 2018, like really undercover. I didn't know what it was or what I wanted to do or how I wanted to do it, or should I talk about it and how does that work, and all these like anxiety filled questions. And then I went through a traumatic professional abuse experience in 2019. And then I just went F it. I said, listen, I'm a Black woman with a PhD. If I'm gonna get flack, I'm just gonna get the flack and I'm gonna keep moving. I'm just tired. I'm just not gonna, okay, people keep telling me what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to act, what I'm supposed to feel, like F all y'all, like I'm just gonna do me. So I winded up moving into more of I'm gonna invest in me and bet on me, because other people kept wanting me in order to be something for them. And I said, I need to be me for me first. Like, no shade to the children that I taught, because love them all. But at the end of the day, I needed to do what was best for me. So there was a lot of anxiety around that because my identity was so attached to being a professor. Everyone had seen me as a professor, and that was the hat that I wore. And of course, at the time I was department chair. So that's another level of bureaucracy, right? Of being that attachment to the academic world, right? So I did my best in order to say, listen, there are going to be times in which people are not going to agree with the way I'm doing things. It's just going to happen. If that happens, then I'll just have to deal with it. But I'm not going to stop my light because someone else is afraid of my light. And so I just moved forward. And I haven't gotten flack outside of, as I said, that professional abuse situation. And even now, like, it's been a couple of years and everything that I thought was going to happen did happen. So it was a God putting in, you know, the road bumps in order to make sure that I wasn't involved in that type of stuff. So hopefully I'm answering all of your questions, because they were all such good questions. But I'll just round it out to say, there will always be tension, right? When you are trying to come into your own, there will always be tension. And what I decided was that the tension was worth it, because I was not happy. I was seeing an environment that was toxic to me. Like, I said, I have a whole like sermon, but basically my back went out. Like, my back went out, and I am not that old. I know black don't crack, but I'm telling you, I was not that old for my back to be going out. And when my back was going out and my husband had to get me out of the bed, it was like, something has to change. I gotta not let what other people want from me be what dictates what I do with my life. And since then, I've had no problems. In 2021, it was, I mean, my accountant was mad at me because I had too much. He was like, I'm trying to get your taxes down, ma'am, but you got too many 1099s.
Those are problems we all want right there.
Those were problems. They were good problems, but because of the fact that I went out there and just did what I wanted to do, finally in 2021, I was able to help like half a dozen other women get 1099s. And that to me was exciting. That to me was like, yes, this is the impact that I want to have. So whatever it is that you want to do, that you feel as though you're not quite getting, then just go do it. Give it a try.
I recently chatted with the author of the Black Academic's Guide to Getting Tenure Without Losing Your Soul.
Woo, that book!
That book is fire.
Woo!
So she's an amazing entrepreneur, sociologist, started, I think it's diversity. I can't remember. It's the faculty diversity website. Yeah. I think she retired too, stepped away. It's like, thank you, tenure. I'm okay. Retired.
Yeah.
So she's amazing. And she said, one of her prayers is, Lord, make it a line item. Make my work a line item, that it be added every year with a 5% increase. Lord, make it a line item. So, you know, and I also want to acknowledge that your story it feels like it's the Black woman's story, the toxic things that we encounter, and having to fight to be seen for our brilliance and the amazing entrepreneurial things we are always doing. And I keep hearing that with all the different women we speak to. So thank you for sharing that. Before I turn it over to Ramesa, and I'm not sure if she's going to continue with the line of questioning that we're in, which I am enjoying so much, or if she has a question about the video, Ramesa, let me know in the chat box. But my question for you is, so a lot of entrepreneurs find things like the Small Business Development Centers or Minority Business Development Center, Women's Business Development Centers, SBDCs, very useful, or other entrepreneurial resources, or fellowships. Where did you look to fill yourself up? What resources did you reach for? Did you reach for any? What are the things you could point to for those of us who have an interest in living in this entrepreneurial space with you and getting those 1099s?
Yeah, get the 10. Yeah, that is tweetable. Get your 1099s. Okay. So what I reached to was podcasts, because I was working full time. And as I mentioned, I was department chair from 2016 to late 2018. And so I didn't have time, right? So yeah, it'd be great if I could have like this whole like wonderful story about, oh yeah, I went to this program and this helped me with this program and I found a mentor. Nah, podcast. So I'm looking specifically for Black women in business. Like I was like very, very niche. And so there is Black Girl CEO, there is Courtney L. Sanders, there is ooh, my podcast list. Let me just bring out my podcast list because they all there. My podcast list.
And if you're willing to share that with us, we'll put a little link next to your
Of
name
course.
on our website so
course.
that folks don't have to feverishly type.
Nicole Walters. Yeah, I just like every Blessed and Bossed Up. All like just Black women. I like literally was typing in because I have an iPhone. Just typed it in. Black women entrepreneurs, and like whoever popped up. Side Hustle Pro. That's what I was listening to. I was just ingesting all of that. I listened to them while I was driving to work. This was pre-pandemic. I was listening to it on the walk from the parking deck to the office. I was listening to it as I was preparing for bed. I would just find an episode and I would just listen to as much as I could and then kept going. And that gave me a lot of like tips and tricks, what to try, what not to try, kind of built up my confidence as well, and saying that I could do this. And those were very helpful. And of course, all of these individuals had like free resources. They have websites. I didn't do any of their courses because I just was ingesting because I was like, I don't know what I need, but I know I need something. And they helped guide me in the very beginning and until I got to the point where I needed an accountability coach. And that's what I have now. One-on-one.
We have another question from Susanna. Once she finishes up, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your online assistant, your virtual assistant. We've talked about that a little bit, but I think folks might be interested in that because sometimes you have so much admin stuff to do and a little money on the side, maybe from your department, and extra hands help. So Susanna, please jump in. We're waiting on Rumesa. I think she stepped away for a second. So the question after this is hers if she returns.
Yes, my question is now more geared toward to your book and your talk on bias. I was wondering, what do you recommend to us to check our own biases? Because you know, I asked this because, well, we were trained with white logic and white methods, as a sociologist professor says, like has a book on that. And also because our own experiences are biased, right? Like we are influenced by our lived experiences. So we know that there are biases out there that have not favored us, but we are also doing now research and could be biased as well. So what is your, like, how do we check at every step of the research process?
Yeah, I think this is definitely the hardest question. It's an excellent question and the hardest question to answer. I don't think I actually have like, what is the thing? Because I think the approach is based upon the situation. It has to be contextualized. I believe there is a conversation that needs to happen with more than just you, right? There needs to be a conversation about what are the operations and practices that are happening in your field. What is standard? What has been normalized? And what is white supremacy? And if we don't get clear about what those things are, there's no way to really check ourselves, because there's internalized white supremacy that I had to work through. I'm still working through, right? And that's a constant happening. It's not something that you just like check a box, because it is whatever, how long were we in school? From age 5 to age 17, 18 here in the States. And you're completely indoctrinated with a certain conditioning, a certain white conditioning. And this happens all over the world. No matter what country you're part of, you're indoctrinated with a certain perspective, and all the other perspectives fade away. So the only way to really counter that is to feed yourself the information you didn't get while you were in school. So, you know, Octavia Butler, read some Nina Simone, get in yourself some James Baldwin. Ooh, James, woo, Lord. I mean, Jimmy be talking. And when it comes to like, if it's US history, and is talking about civil rights movement, move past, you know, Rosa Parks and MLK and Malcolm X. Go to Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, that woman Woo, her story. I mean, good God. I mean, she was prevented from having children. So what did she do? She testified in front of Congress about voting rights. I mean, whole thing, just her whole platform, right? So those are the type of thing that I think we can do like today, is go back and really start unearthing the people from marginalized communities who have been underestimated, who have been put into the shadows, bring out their works and read those, and then tell as many people as possible about those works. That's why the work of Tim Neat, I'm always going to be championing. I'm always going to be putting that up front. You know, the work of anyone from indigenous communities, I'm gonna be putting that up front. Anyone from Latinx community, I'm gonna be putting that up front. Anybody who has been pushed aside, their work I'm always gonna highlight. And I try to do that in the book. So in the book, you will see whom I reference are people from all different backgrounds and creeds. I don't rely just on the white gaze. And that's how you can check your biases.
And I don't know if you've gotten our swag bag in the mail, Brandeis, did you get it? We sent them some bell hooks.
Bell hooks, bell.
Mm.
Oh, bell.
So
Like
we're gonna, go ahead.
I was just gonna say a random comment, which is, I wish our society would elevate bell hooks a whole lot more, because the work, her centering of Black feminist thought is so critical and crucial. And I think it's manifested today. It's manifesting today on how Black women are treated in digital realms. She said a lot of stuff. She said a lot of things that are coming true, like right now.
And I deeply appreciate the way that you suggested we think about countering our own bias. One thing I've started to do for myself is I don't assume that the white man that is put in front of me who has founded this thing is the founder. I ask who inspired that person. And every day I feel like I find a story where, you know, some great company the idea was stolen from somebody that looked like us. So I think it's important to keep asking those questions and not make assumptions.
Exactly. I mean, even like David Hogue, who is championing gun reform, he was inspired by BLM.
Mm-hmm.
He says that all the time, but people don't talk about it.
I mean,
he says it all the time.
I'm trying to remember the feminist movement that, you know, the hashtag recently that we realized belonged to Tarana Burke, that somebody else.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. Like, you know, yeah, every step of the way, the question is, where did this come from? Because we, you know, we're the culture, it probably came from us.
Yeah, that's why I say we're the texture.
Mm.
And that's the reason why I say inside a lot of what I talk about in the book is about the fact that data still needs to maintain the texture. And that texture is basically the context. By the fact that we are taking raw data, zeros and ones, numbers, audio, visual content, and then we're reducing it down to zeros and ones, and then trying to clean it up, so to speak. I call it polished. But anyway, we clean it up, we remove the context, and then we try to insert that context back in. What sense does that make? None. So we're in essence doing it wrong. And we're doing it that way because the original designers of a lot of technologies didn't have any context to begin with. Oh, I said a word, I'm just gonna let that settle with y'all. They didn't have any context to begin with. So then they just removed it. They didn't understand it. They didn't care to understand it. There was no one in the room that didn't look like them. So therefore they deemed it unimportant and not valuable. But yet what they pay for, what they replicate, what they appropriate, what they co-opt is our texture, and then make money off of it. Hello, every platform, every single platform has Black, Latinx, LGBTQ people part of it. If they were not part of it, if we were not part of it, it wouldn't be a platform. Hello, Facebook. Hello, Twitter. Hello, TikTok. Hello, Nikes. Hello, Jordans. Everything, every single thing, everything. We are in it.
We are the culture. We are the texture.
We are.
Rumesa, are you there? Are we going to get a question from Rumesa? Are we going to Gatumsa next? So Gatumsa, go ahead and turn on your camera and let's have you ask your question.
Actually, when I was about thinking, asking the question, I feel that it has been touched by, but with regard to culture, have you come across different cultures about their position with regard to bias?
Yeah.
And the second one is, do you think you have something in your mind about to offset this biasness, like an approach or a methodological orientation that offset this biasness coming from either statistical or mathematical errors, as well as the social or cultural inequalities? Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to try to answer quickly. Let's see. Okay. So I am US born. That means that I have a certain privilege of Western culture, quote unquote, even though I'm oppressed by and aggressed by this place in which I live, right, the United States. So my framing, I always try to check myself to go, am I thinking like a USian, United States of America person, or am I trying to think more globally, right? There are some times in which I am, USC, that's exactly what you spell it, USC. And I do my best in order to first try to position whether or not I'm thinking Western culture or not. And if I am thinking Western culture, I just try to say that and make sure that is very clear. This is from a Western positioning. And I even have had opportunity to talk with people in many parts of the world and say, listen, I don't know transnationally what's going on with AI, because AI isn't right in the United States. So I can't even wrap my head around what's going on with AI in Africa, AI in China, AI in any other country, even though other countries I think have a better understanding of what they want to do with it. So that's how I approach it. I just try to make sure I try to check my own privilege and then try to say what I think is happening. And then, so I think I answered that. That was the first question. The second question was about bias and how do I deal with companies who are maybe resistant to talking about societal things versus talking about statistical. Was your question? Make sure I have that right.
Any methodological orientation you come up with to offset this challenge with regard to the two bias?
Oh, so what do I do to upset? Okay, so I address, I try to do my best. I try to read the room pretty quickly. So being the fact that I've been teaching for 20 years since I was a grad student, I can pretty much assess a room pretty quickly. So I can figure out how many people are analytical, how many people are kind of in the social sciences, especially if they like show me their cameras or I'm in person. So I try to address the statistical stuff first and say, okay, here's statistical. And then I find loopholes in the statistics, right? I talk about the epsilon, so to speak. And so when I start talking about the epsilon, they're like, oh yeah, we mask that by doing this. We mask that by doing, so I say, so you're masking quite a bit here, but your epsilon's only like 0.0001. How do you account for all of what you're masking in 0.0001? And then I can actually get to the societal. And then I disrupt them because their analytical brains can't put the societal things into a math equation. And either they are completely repelled and get mad at me for bringing up the inequities of and the disparities inside of mathematical equations, or they actually like engage and go, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. What other books do you have? And then I start talking about algorithms of oppression, automated inequality. I start giving them books. I say, you know, here's kind of places to start seeing that there is more out there than your mathematical modeling. That makes sense? But it doesn't work all the time, I have to admit. Some people that are analytical do not want to hear anything societal, and that's okay. They're just not the people that are going to hire me or want to talk to me. And I'm fine with that, because I don't want to be frustrated either. So we're doing each other a favor.
So I'm going to invite Ramesa to ask our final question. She stepped away to comfort her daughter, I think, who had a nightmare and is now. I mean, but this world we live in right now is a nightmare. So I hear the child. I hear the child.
But a child should not be having a nightmare.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ramesa. Take it away.
Thanks for the talk. I just have one question. I really like your idea of the hill, the architecture of the biases. I just want to ask whether is there kind of a heart, like the center of all the biases there, where we can step our knife and the whole, like, to get all the biases down. Because I had this idea from Hart and Negri, they had this idea for globalization. This is also another big structure. They were advising, like, rather than attacking one part of a globalization, we have to attack it in the heart.
Yeah.
So like a center. I just wonder how do you think about kind of pulling all these biases apart and down?
Yeah.
Thank you for
so no, this is a good one. You guys have so many good questions. Can I get these down? Oh my God. Okay. So I think the heart of all the biases is really our own heart, right? I mean, literally, it is our own heart. If we do not have the care factor, we're not going to address any of this. But I don't believe that there's a way to bring all the biases together under one framework. I believe that in all that I've read, there is different biases that impact different people with different granularities at different times. And we need to be more conscientious of that. So what I mean, okay, so let's give a concrete example. Okay, a while back, Apple has a card, and they have a credit card. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but Apple has this credit card. Apple credit card would assign a particular credit limit based upon features of you, right? Your credit history, of course, your salary and things like that. Well, what wind up happening is that a very well-known engineer, very well-respected engineer, got an Apple card. His credit limit was higher than his spouse. His spouse happened to be a woman. The woman actually earned more than him, but her credit score and her Apple card was less than his. So it wind up getting this, it was a tweet that went out, and then other people started talking about it. Other people started getting this Apple card. The men's credit limit were higher than their spouses, who happen to be women. And there was this conversation about, why is this, even if the women earned more, right? So there's a bias there with women. There's also a bias when it comes to any type of historically excluded person. Their credit limit was different as well. We see this all throughout, at least American society, right? And arguably all over the world. We see this, right? This trickling effect. We also saw this with COVID. COVID initially really ravished certain populations that happen to be older generations. Then it ravaged Black people and Latin people in the United States in particular. Then it started ravaging children. But now it's ravaging white people because a lot of Black people and Latin people have actually gotten vaccinated. So the bias in all of these scenarios hits different at different times. And so that means we have to be as agile with bias as we can. One framework is maybe going to tell us that biases exist, but they won't tell us when it's happening and to whom it's happening. And so how we therefore respond to the bias has to be contextualized with this who and when pillars understood. So that's why I think the conversation transnationally is kind of one that doesn't quite make sense to me. Because what's happening in Europe, in certain parts of Europe, and what's happening in the States versus what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Mexico, they don't align. Because the culture issues that are in the UK are different than the culture issues in Canada, even though they're still under the British monarchy, right? And the British monarchy is already crumbling because a number of the Black-led countries are now trying to remove themselves from that hierarchy, from that colonization, right? So there's just a lot going on when it comes to bias. And that's why I have this bias wheel, is to really kind of delve into the fact that there's a ripple effect. And we need to be more conscious of this ripple effect and own that, so that we don't rely so much on technology, because technology doesn't have context. It's the people that have context to know which technology may or may not be helpful for a particular scenario. Long-winded answer, sorry, but it was an important question.
It was an exceptionally important question. So, somebody—
See, I told you they're gonna have questions. There was no worries.
Somebody just said they signed up for their newsletter, your newsletter, and they love that there's a joke. There are data jokes that pop up. So
every time I got a data joke, I take it from somebody.
So
you're gonna laugh at the end.
I have to thank you for joining us, Professor, Dr., Chief Executive Officer Brandeis Marshall. I know you don't always get to share this part of your expertise, and I am happy that we were a space where you were able to share that. Thank you for sharing your many streams of brilliance. So much quotable, notable, amazing knowledge dropped in this session. Everybody start working on those 1099s, like get the side hustle. Thank you for being unapologetically you.
Thank you all for watching. For more information on SICSS-Howard Mathematica, visit our website, follow us on social media, and join our email list.